Alright, this is Unit 3 Polynomials, Day 7. We're going to work on factoring by grouping. So when you're factoring by grouping, you want to look and see if you can find a common factor between some of the terms in your polynomial. When you're grouping, you're going to group your terms, and notice there are 4 distinct terms here. Terms are separated by the addition and subtraction signs. I'm going to group the first 2 terms together, and then group the second 2 terms together. So sometimes it helps to draw a little line separating out what you're going to factor. So looking at the first 2 terms, I'm looking for a common GCF, or greatest common factor, between both terms. And with these guys, the greatest common factor is x to the third, because each term has at least 3 x's in it. To factor, you're reverse distributing, and you're asking yourself, what do I multiply x to the third by to get x to the fourth? X to the third times x gives me x to the fourth. What do I multiply x to the third by to get negative x to the third? And here it's just negative 1. So I'm just reversing the distribution to figure out what the 2 factors are that I can multiply to get these 2 terms. I'm going to do the same thing over here. My goal is to get the same value inside of the parentheses. So I'm going to pull out positive 5 because each term has a 5 in it. And I'm also going to pull out an x because each term has x in it as well, at least one x. Doing that, I hopefully will get the same value here. I get x, which 5x times x is 5x squared, minus 1 would give me negative 5x. So now that I've factored by grouping, I have a common factor between these 2 terms. Remember, terms are separated by addition or subtraction. So here we have these multiplied together and these multiplied together, being separated by a plus sign. So a common factor that I can pull out from each, or factor out from each term, is x minus 1. If I factor out x minus 1 from each, what's left over is x to the third plus 5x. Now, unfortunately, sometimes when you're factoring, you don't get to pull everything out when you're factoring by grouping. So in this term, I still see there's a common factor between them. And if you look, both of them have x in common. So I can factor out an x as well. So my answer, the x minus 1 doesn't change. I'm going to pull out an x times x squared plus 5. And generally, the general notation is you would write the x on the outside by itself, and then x minus 1 and x squared plus 5. I could have taken care of that x in the beginning if I had found the greatest common factor between the 4 terms before I grouped them, because they each had an x in common. But in the end, I still was able to catch it when you're doing your factoring. So when you're factoring by grouping, separate out your problem into 2 distinct groups and see if you can find the common factor between those groupings. Then you can factor out that common factor and get your final answer. If there is a greatest common factor to start off with, pull that out in the beginning and you can save yourself a step at the end. Try the rest of those problems on your own.